everybody, Kirk Tusaw here with another edition of Legalese. Today I'm going to talk about Bill C-15, which is an act to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act here in Canada and make consequential amendments to the criminal code in order to impose mandatory minimum sentences for a variety of drug offenses. The Bill C-15, passed in the House of Commons. It's a bill that was proposed by the minority Conservative government and supported in the House of Commons by the official opposition, the Liberal Party of Canada. The bill then went to the Senate, where the Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs spent a couple of months studying it. A number of people testified in opposition to the bill. There was a tremendous range of evidence provided to the committee that this bill was not going to achieve its intended goals. Wasn't even really targeted at the so-called high-level organized criminals that the government would have you believe they're targeting, and in fact that the bill would cause more damage to Canadian society than it prevented. Despite that and the lack of evidence put forward by the government supporting the bill, at one point the Minister of Justice said, look, we don't care about statistics, we're not interested in evidence, we're passing this bill because the Canadians that we talk to want us to pass this bill to send a message. That's how little support in the actual science base and evidence that this legislation has. Despite all of this testimony, the Senate did adopt the legislation. There were minor amendments made. I'm going to discuss what those amendments are and what they are not, because the media has reported on this story and, quite frankly, gotten it wrong more than they've gotten it right with the aid of the spin doctors of the Conservative Party of Canada. But the bill is now headed back to the House of Commons. The House is on break until January 26th. We have a period of time to organize our efforts. The House must pass a bill identical in language to that which passed the Senate. And so the House has an opportunity now to either adopt the bill as amended or to make their own changes to the bill and send it back to the Senate. That could include sending it back to a House committee for study and changes, or the House of Commons could refuse to enact this legislation entirely. And one hopes that the opposition parties that opposed the bill previously, the NDP and the Bloc Québécois, will continue to oppose it, and that right-thinking members of the Liberal Party of Canada will also oppose this legislation, and together those parties can block its implementation. So let me now talk just very briefly about what the bill looks like when it has been amended by the Senate. I've talked at length in other programs available at the POT TV station on YouTube, as well as at www.yprohibition.ca. You can see oral and written testimony and past presentations about the impact of this bill. So I'm not going to talk at length about all of the provisions. It is not just a cannabis bill. I am going to focus on cannabis today, but this bill also does dramatic and dangerous things to other substances, and its impacts will particularly be felt by those charged with MDMA, ecstasy offenses, which is now moving up from Schedule 3 to Schedule 1 and becoming subject to the mandatory minimum sentences, as well as those persons, primarily street dealers of Schedule 1 substances like cocaine, crack, methamphetamine, and heroin, who are unfortunately addicted to those substances and who are trafficking in them in order to subsidize the black market prices that they have to pay to obtain those substances. Those people are going to end up going to jail in vast numbers if this legislation goes through, with tragic consequences. But let's talk about cannabis, and let me clear up some of the myths you may have seen in the media about what the Senate did or did not do to this bill. What happened is the Senate made some minor amendments to the legislation. I think that the amendments did not go nearly far enough. For example, I gave testimony and proposed in writing a number of amendments dealing with medical marijuana producers and distributors like the Compassion Clubs and their suppliers, who are going to fall into this legislation and face mandatory minimum jail terms for their compassionate work. I stayed after my testimony and spent an hour writing up proposals at the request of a number of members of the committee. None of those were even debated.